Indian forces, under extreme weather conditions, stood their ground, refusing to budge in the face of advancing Chinese troops. Yes, we are talking about Doklam.
Because the line is very clear.
No, it's not. It's clear to us, but it's not clear to you.
It's clear. It's clear. The line is very clear.
It's not clear.
This is not your area. No.
In this episode of Tipping Point, we explore how the demand for tea and tobacco in Tibet ultimately led to this, and what pushed India to make the move. Tibet was a huge market for Indian products during the 18th century, and the British Empire worked towards improving its trade routes from India into Tibet in order to sell goods produced by Indian colonies. They realized Sikkim, then an independent kingdom, to be the ideal connecting point and annexed the northern part in 1888. This made transport easier, but the British now faced a new challenge: conflict with China along the new border. Tea and tobacco sales were far too important for Britain, and to avoid future troubles, met with China 2 years later in order to clearly define Sikkim-Tibet border. The Treaty of 1890 was signed by Governor-General of India, Lord Lansdowne, and the Chinese Ambon, or resident in Tibet, Shengtai. Was it clear? Not really. The treaty laid out that the borders begin at a point called Mount Gipmochi, and if you read further, it says that the boundary must follow the watershed. These are two contradicting set of instructions with two completely different points on the map, making the interpretation of such a treaty difficult. If you ask China, they choose Mount Gipmochi as the starting point, while India chooses Batangla on the natural watershed line as the starting point, and no one really paid too much attention to it until the late 1940s. Major changes in both governments during this time brought about friendly relations, but the post-World War II era saw some dramatic shifts. India gained independence from Britain, and the process of decolonization saw another nation emerge on the subcontinent, Pakistan. Around the same time, the Chinese government was overthrown and the communists seized power in China, establishing the People's Republic of China. Following the annexation of Tibet into the newly established PRC in 1951, the length of the Indo-China border increased manifold, and relations began to sour over border disputes ranging from the Aksai Chin area in the northwest to NEFA in the northeast. The stage was thus set for India and China to conflict over Doklam. In 1959, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru had written to his Chinese counterpart Zhou Enlai. In the letter, Mr. Nehru agreed that there is no dispute over the boundary between Sikkim and Tibet. However, with regards to the border between Bhutan and Tibet, he states that Chinese maps show sizable areas of Bhutan as part of Tibet, and had requested that the same be rectified by Chinese authorities. But with deteriorating relations, the matter could not be pursued further. 3 years later, the two nations were at war with one another, largely resulting from Chinese military intrusions in disputed areas, including a Chinese military highway in Indian territory. Much of the world viewed China as the aggressor, and in spite of a military victory, they faced a huge political setback. Relations between India and China had hit rock bottom. Following the war, there was a massive build-up and modernization of the Indian Army in the mid-1960s to protect its borders from any further aggression. Coming back to Doklam, a Chinese road-building exercise in the disputed territory triggered the standoff. But if you look carefully, whether the border starts at Batangla or Gipmochi would not affect Indian territory in any way. So why is India involved in the issue? Bhutan was not part of discussions when the British and Chinese signed the 1890 treaty, so its borders with Tibet have never been officially demarcated. In 1960, China issued a statement claiming that Bhutan, Sikkim and Ladakh were a part of unified family in Tibet, subject to the great motherland of China. Alarmed by the announcement, Bhutan closed off its border with China and shut all trade with them. They also entered into formal defense arrangements with India, a close ally. India was even responsible for representing Bhutan in all border talks with China. Bhutan asserts that the disputed region is Bhutanese territory and had even signed a treaty with China in 1998 for maintaining the status quo and peace on its borders. China agreed to show respect for Bhutan's sovereignty in the region and work to build ties peacefully. However, Bhutan claims that China's building of roads on the disputed land is in violation of the 1998 agreement. China, on the other hand, claims that the road building exercise does not violate the status quo and should not provoke such a reaction. India rushed to Bhutan's aid and took up positions at Dokla in order to block any further road construction in the disputed area.
Sir, please take photograph. Sir, ऐसे लगाओ. हाँ, बाहर आना.
Another important concern that may have prompted India to make such a move is the strategically important Chicken's Neck. Nearly 140 kilometers south of Dokla lies an area known as the Chicken's Neck, or more commonly known as the Siliguri Corridor. It emerged after the creation of Bangladesh in 1971 and poses a serious strategic challenge for India. A Chinese military advance into the area could cut off Bhutan, part of West Bengal, and all of the northeast India from the rest of the country. The strategic importance of the region can be seen when in 1996 the Chinese were willing to cede almost 500 square kilometers of territorial claims to Bhutan in exchange for merely 250 square kilometers of the Doklam area. The request was, however, declined. After 3 months of dialogue and discussion, India and China have mutually agreed to disengage from the Doklam Plateau, bringing an end to the military face-off. It is amazing to see how something as small as trading tea and tobacco could one day spiral into a standoff between the two Asian giants, with the rest of the world anxiously watching on.